Hello, and welcome to this culinary medicine cooking class. My name is Emily Clairmont. I'm a registered dietitian with the University of Vermont Medical Center and the Comprehensive Pain Program. Today's class is focused on gut health and the relationship between our gut health and chronic pain and inflammation. Before we get started, I just want to remind you to visit my table to get the handouts for today's class. It includes both the recipe, the shopping guide, and equipment list if you want to make this recipe yourself or cook along with me, as well as education on the topic. So culinary medicine is the combination of two fields, nutrition science and cooking. And we bring these together to deliver cooking classes that are hopefully enjoyable, produce good food, as well as provide you with some good information. Before we get going on the recipe itself, I'm going to just talk a little bit about gut health. So every day, especially in 2021, we are learning more and more about the gut and its role in our health. For years, we knew that food went through the gut, food came in one end, went out the other, and that was how we derived our nutrients. And now we are learning that what goes on in our digestive system, what lives in our digestive system, healthy bacteria and yeast, are playing a crucial role in maintaining the health of our gut as well as maintaining the health of our body. So there's estimated, I've heard as low as 40 trillion, but as much as 100 trillion cells that make up our gut microbiome. Again, the microbiome being our healthy bacteria and yeast that live in our gut. And these bacteria and yeast, through digestion of their own, help provide many essential nutrients and inflammatory compounds to our body. So the gastrointestinal tract, right? So starting at our lips and going all the way down is the organ that allows us to absorb nutrients into our body. It is actually considered the outside of our body because nutrients actually have to pass through the gut wall before they are technically inside our body. And so at a minimum, maintaining a healthy gut can help us with managing inflammation and chronic pain simply by helping us absorb the nutrients that we need to build a strong and healthy body. There are certainly components of the gut microbiome and of this topic that relate to specific foods. So many of you have likely heard about probiotics. So probiotics, otherwise I would say called healthy bacteria, are essentially, they are live cultures of bacteria and yeast that are delivered in specific foods. In today's recipe, we're going to be using kimchi. I have a couple examples of kimchi. These are both local to me here in Vermont, and likely wherever you are, or perhaps made in your own home, you will find kimchi. It's similar to sauerkraut, except for using slightly different ingredients as well as different spices. So again, healthy bacteria and yeast, they assist us in providing the bacteria and yeast that live and reside in our gut. When we consume naturally fermented foods on a regular basis, we are actually consuming these healthy bacteria and yeast and contributing to our gut microbiome by actually adding bacteria and yeast to our gut. Now, bacteria and yeast, they self-proliferate, right? So they reproduce on their own. However, it can be beneficial for us to consume these types of foods on a regular basis to replenish in the event that our gut isn't turning over as much as we would like it to, or as much as we would think it would be. So kimchi is one example of a naturally fermented food that contains healthy bacteria and yeast, but there's also yogurt, kefir, miso, sauerkraut, skyr. There's a very long list, and in fact, if you're into this topic, perhaps looking at the books Wild Fermentation or The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz, they're really kind of like the compendium of all fermented foods. The key to knowing whether or not a food is naturally fermented and whether or not we're going to be getting any live bacteria and yeast from there is whether or not it's refrigerated in the grocery store. So we're probably all familiar with being able to buy sauerkraut in the grocery store in the same aisle that we buy ketchup and mustard, relish. It's canned, it's shelf stable, and what that tells us is that it has been heat treated, meaning that they have canned it, brought it up to a really high temperature, killed off any bacteria and yeast, and sealed it. That's perfectly fine in terms of food safety, but if we are trying to get healthy bacteria into our diet and into our gut, then we want to actually visit the refrigerated section at the grocery store and buy our fermented foods there, such as the sauerkraut, the kimchi, and certainly yogurt. I shied away from using the term probiotics when we're talking about naturally fermented foods. Probiotics these days are actually more specifically referring to the dietary supplement. So specific known strains of bacteria and yeast that have been combined into a capsule or a liquid or a powder, and oftentimes have known specific health benefits. So I strayed away from using probiotics when talking about food, and in fact just talking about these naturally fermented foods as providing us with healthy bacteria and yeast. So I mentioned that these healthy bacteria and yeast that make up our gut microbiome, they reproduce on their own. However, to do so, they have to be fed. So that's where we come into play in terms of digesting dietary fiber. So this is what is referred to as prebiotic fibers. There are specific and known types of prebiotic fibers that our gut bacteria prefer, or perhaps make them proliferate better than others. However, I believe that any dietary fiber that we consume through whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds are going to benefit our gut bacteria in a positive way. So when we hear about the term prebiotic fiber, certain companies, dietary supplements, and certain education can be referring to specific dietary fiber, such as chicory root, dandelion greens, and an inulin. And I suppose there are others as well, Jerusalem artichoke. These are not foods that we naturally or essentially walk into a grocery store and see on the shelves. There are ways that we can consume these types of foods. Certainly dandelion greens, we might see those in the grocery store. We might see them on our front lawn for sure. But in terms of chicory root, maybe we would take that as a tea. Jerusalem artichoke, again, we don't necessarily see that in grocery stores, but perhaps in health food stores at the certain time of year that we harvest them. So oftentimes these very specific prebiotic fibers are going to be found more in a dietary supplement, which is why from a dietitian standpoint, from a whole food dietitian standpoint, I would say eat food, real food, whole food, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, whole grains, you will absolutely be getting lots of dietary fiber that your gut bacteria and yeast will be able to eat up and allow them to reproduce, hopefully resulting in a nice, healthy digestive system. For some individuals, I should say, for some individuals who experience IBS, specifically with significant gas and bloating, sometimes prebiotic fibers, the ones that I mentioned, as well as our naturally fermented foods, are not well tolerated. And that's okay. There are certainly long lists of plant foods that do not produce the same amount of gas and bloating in individuals. What I'm referring to is a low FODMAP diet, FODMAP, F as in fermentable, or a low fermentable carbohydrate diet. And there's a long list of vegetables and fruits, nuts and seeds that don't cause that sort of gas and bloating that people can experience, some individuals, when they consume the naturally fermented foods, as well as the specific prebiotic fibers that I mentioned. And I said this just a minute ago, but that's okay, because we can consume these other plant foods that contain dietary fibers, and our gut bacteria will absolutely still consume those and be able to reproduce. So we don't necessarily have to get locked in to a short list in order to have a healthy gut microbiome. So lastly, we've talked about probiotics, healthy bacteria. We've talked about prebiotics. So those that come before healthy bacteria and yeast, those that feed our healthy bacteria and yeast. Then there are postbiotics. And postbiotics are not necessarily found in foods. However, they are the byproduct of our gut bacteria, our gut microbiome. So when gut bacteria take in these dietary fibers, what they produce, what comes out of them, are either going to be compounds that our body can use in various ways, as well as they can help us digest and absorb specific vitamins, such as vitamin K. Some of the compounds that they produce, known as short-chain fatty acids, one in particular called butyrate, is not only helpful in modulating our inflammatory response, but it is also essential for maintaining the health of our gut lining. So this is really important when we're trying to heal our gut. We count on those bacteria and yeast not only to digest our dietary fiber, to help us produce vitamins and minerals, but also to maintain the health of the tissue that lines our gut. Those are known as postbiotics. And lastly, the thing that I talk about when it comes to gut health and pain management are our plant-based enzymes. So these coming from papaya, pineapple, and ginger. They all have the enzymes that they produce. So enzymes break things down, and the enzymes that are found within these foods, within these plant foods, all have a very similar name. So in papaya, it's called papain. In pineapple, it's called bromelain. And in ginger, it's called zinzibane or zingabane. And so these specific enzymes, as I said, enzymes break things down, are proteolytic. They break down proteins. And so if we're consuming these particular foods as part of a meal, they are going to help us digest proteins found in the meal. If we take them away from food, these proteolytic enzymes can also help break down proteins that we have circulating in our system, including some inflammatory compounds, which are made of proteins, or partly made of proteins. So I bring up these plant-based enzymes as another tool that we have through our digestive system to help modulate inflammation. I should say that all of these probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, plant-based enzymes, these are all found in dietary supplements. So we can certainly get them from whole foods. We can absolutely get them from dietary supplements as well. If we consume the whole food, we have a much broader, a much more broad delivery of nutrients and load of nutrients, not just the enzymes, not just the bacteria or the fiber. So I am a proponent of food first. Give that a try. If it's unmanageable, not able to get it in your diet, then certainly look toward dietary supplements. Always talking to your healthcare provider, letting them know what you're taking, what your questions are, and certainly talking to a dietitian, a registered dietitian who can help you navigate the world of dietary supplements. So that's what I wanted to share with you about how our gut plays a pretty crucial role in managing inflammation. But like I said, at a bare minimum, our body does not get any nutrients that don't go through the digestive tract. So at a minimum, our gut is going to help us digest and absorb the nutrients that we need to have a strong immune system, to have a strong inflammatory response, and an appropriate inflammatory response. All right, let's get to the recipe. So this recipe is called a kimchi avocado salad. It's relatively quick to put together, but nonetheless, it can be really helpful to prep in advance. And so a key term that we use in culinary medicine is called mise en place. The term is not specific to culinary medicine. It's more something that culinary professionals use. But like we said, it's culinary and medicine. So mise en place translates to everything in its place. And in the kitchen, that translates to organization, planning, hopefully for a smooth, easy transition through the recipe. So as you can see here, I'm not going to tilt it too much because I might spill something, but as you can see here, I have made my mise en place for this recipe. I've portioned everything out that I need. You can see my cooking space is nice and clean. I have my plates that I'm going to use. I have any additional ingredients that I need. I have some tools as well here on my side. This is important in terms of, certainly efficiency and flow of the recipe, but also in terms of energy conservation. So that we don't necessarily burn ourselves out by turning around, going back to the fridge, going into the cupboards, looking for ingredients, maybe last minute while we're making the recipe. So in mise en place is something that you can do in advance. You could do it an hour, a couple hours, you could do this a day in advance. There are no ingredients here that would necessarily spoil. Keeping it in the fridge might be a good idea for some of the ingredients. So with that said, this recipe includes avocado, a beet, kimchi, naturally fermented kimchi, toasted Brazil nuts and sesame seeds, and then for the dressing, we're going to make a homemade salad dressing with simple ingredients: apple cider vinegar, extra virgin olive oil, and a little bit of maple syrup. To get this started, I think we're going to start with the salad dressing. Get that out of the way so that when we build the salad, we have the salad dressing all ready. So I have a little jar, I have a little lid. That's all we need in terms of making the recipe in addition to the ingredients. So we've got a couple tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. We have a couple tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, oil to vinegar, or it could be oil to acid. Perhaps maybe you don't have apple cider vinegar, or maybe you don't like apple cider vinegar. You could use another acid such as lemon juice, lime juice, or you could use another vinegar. White balsamic vinegar is quite nice for salad dressings, as is champagne vinegar. So a 2-to-1, whatever you're looking for, or whatever ingredients you're using, and then just 1 itty bitty teaspoon of maple syrup. We're not necessarily going to use this whole amount for this recipe. So if you're concerned about consuming too much sugar, that can always be less. It doesn't need to be there in the first place. It does act as a little bit of an emulsifier, so bringing the ingredients together, but we can also use mustard, which it also has an emulsifying property to it. So there are ways to do this without the sweetener. So then we just shake it. And there's lots of different gadgets out there that help you make salad dressings at home. And this is probably the most straightforward way. So we'll give it a good shake now. We'll give it a good shake before we put it on the salad. So off to the side it goes. Next, what we're gonna do is I'm going to shred the beet. And so there's a number of ways to do this. This is just 1 beet. If we were doing a lot more, perhaps we would get our food processor out. That allows us to shred a lot all at once. We could do a cheese grater. However, the tool that I'm going to use today is a microplane. And I really love a microplane. This is just the traditional microplane. It does come in, I don't know how many different, it comes in many different styles, but this is just a traditional microplane, and you can use it to grate things. You can use it to zest. So if you want to get like the zest off a lemon or a lime or an orange, a microplane is a great tool. It's lightweight and easy to use. So, and I just have a little bowl here for us to put the shredded beet in. So, and I'm using a chef knife here. I am not going to peel the beet. It's been washed, it's clean. You know, we're talking about feeding our gut. We're talking about dietary fiber. We're talking about those prebiotic fibers. I'm a big fan of leaving the skin on as much as possible, or as often as possible. If that really turns you off, or if the beet happens to have some really thick skin, by all means you can peel it. But for this demonstration, for this class, we're gonna leave it on. And so you'll notice that, you know, and I'm sure you've noticed this in your own kitchen, right? There are some vegetables, some fruits that are a little bit awkward to cut into, a little bit awkward to chop. Usually the ones that are like nice and round and wobbly. This beet happens to have like a nice flat surface on it, which I didn't plan for, but it helps, right? We're always looking for that flat surface so that we can be as safe as possible in the kitchen. So this doesn't roll away and we end up cutting ourselves. But the other thing to think about is how you hold a knife. So you'll notice here that I'm gripped up onto the blade itself. I have my thumb and pointer finger right up on the blade, with my middle finger kind of butting up to the back of the blade. By doing so, it allows me to have really good control, a firm grip on the knife itself. If I go back on the knife, what can happen is we can end up putting a lot of strain on our wrist that we didn't intend to. It also reduces the amount of control that we have on the knife itself. So with something that can be kind of hard to cut through sometimes, we want to have as much control as possible. We want to have a nice sharp blade. So keeping your knives sharpened, whether that's at home or bringing them to a place to be sharpened, is a really nice idea. All right, so with this other hand, I'm going to make a nice claw, I'm going to, kind of tuck back my fingers so that I don't cut myself. And something that, is off here to the right is my compost bin. And so I always keep a bowl for compost here. And that's another thing that then I don't need to turn around, waste my energy trying to do a good thing. And so I'm just taking the top and bottoms off. And I noticed there was also one little area here that looked like it needed to go. Other than that, it looks pretty good. And so we'll take this and we'll literally just start shaving away. So this is going to make a relatively fine shred, and that's okay. It all depends on what you like. You can see it kind of coming out the bottom. I find that microplanes are also relatively easy to clean. That is, as long as you clean it, relatively soon after using it. The other nice thing about our current world is that we have a lot of pre-prepared vegetables and fruits available to us these days. So when I was at the grocery store shopping for this, I took a look around, and for sure there was already pre-shredded beets along with other vegetables as well. Pre-shredded carrots. I believe there was pre-chopped butternut squash. And so for some of these vegetables that are harder to work with, and/or we're trying to include them or in our diet in slightly different ways, grocery stores have smartened up, and food manufacturers have smartened up, and they're giving us what we want. They're giving us these pre-shredded vegetables. A lot of those vegetables that we see at the grocery store are prepared by the grocery store themselves. You can always ask them that if it doesn't say so directly on the package. But be informed. When was it cut up? Are there any preservatives on it? But a lot of them, like I said, a lot of grocery stores are simply just doing it themselves with the produce that they have in-house. Okay, we'll just shred a little bit more. And so this was the smallest beet that I could find. But this recipe doesn't call for too much. But can you have more beet if you want it? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing really about the proportions of this particular meal that couldn't be modified. All right, so we have our beets. Kind of clean that up a little bit. We have our beets, and now we're going to prep the avocado. Again, kind of another, maybe a finicky food that we might find at the grocery store. Might be hard as a rock, might be, so soft that we can put like our thumb through it. Finding a good avocado can certainly be challenging at certain times of the year. I like to buy my avocados relatively hard, and then I put them in the refrigerator and I let them slowly ripen in the refrigerator. There's certainly a number of ways to do it, but essentially when I'm ready to have an avocado, I take it out, and typically about 1 day later, it's good to go. So let me just clean this off. Not that it would do anything to the recipe, but it would certainly put a red juice all over the avocado. So to cut an avocado, to get into an avocado, I like to kind of create this bridge with my hand, and then I put the knife underneath it. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut through until we hit the pit, and then we're going to just spin around the whole avocado, like so. Again, a sharp knife goes a long way. So once we've cut into the avocado, we can literally just kind of twist it, and voila. This is a gorgeous avocado. It's one of those things, right? You never know what you're gonna get with an avocado. But this one looks pretty good. And then, so we've got a pit in here. And this can be a tricky thing for people to get out. Every now and then you get one and it just kind of falls out, and you wish every avocado was like that. But in this case, it is firmly in there. So what I'm gonna do is, you can see, right? I'm like firmly gripped onto my knife. I've got the avocado in my other hand. I'm going to line this up and bring the blade down hard. The intention there is that I'm going to pierce the avocado, and from there I'll be able to essentially twist it and pull it out. The pit will stay attached to the knife. Another option could be the same sort of bridge claw and pushing it in. And so I'm doing that just to demonstrate it. It's whatever you're comfortable with. And so twist, and there's the pit. And then to get it off, essentially just doing a pushing downward motion will get it right off the blade. Great. So now we've got two halves of this avocado. We've got two plates. We're going to make the base of the avocado kimchi salad. So we're just going to slice the avocado in strips. We'll do the other side. So this is a plant-based meal, right? This is on all accounts, we could call it a vegan meal, but it's plant-based, right? We're focused on getting dietary fiber. We're focused also on getting naturally fermented foods. We are trying to provide nutrients to our gut that will help promote a good and healthy and robust microbiome. So avocados, being known for their fat content, are also very high in dietary fiber. So the next step in getting an avocado out is to scoop it out. So now that we've cut it, I'm just going to go around the outside edge all the way. You can see it's like starting to fan out already. Must mean that this avocado is like good to go. And we'll put it on the plate. We'll see if I can do this with grace. And we're going to fan it out. So we'll do the same thing with the other side. It's confirmed. This is a good looking avocado. They must have known that I was coming in today. So sometimes it can stick when we get to kind of the part of the avocado that was attached to the tree. So we'll just flip that over, fan this out a little bit. Our chef educator introduced us all to this recipe, and this was a recipe that her now husband made for her on their very first date. And we laugh about it every time because it's a pretty bold move for a first date, and cooking for a chef. All right, so we have our two avocados fanned out, and now we can just dress it however we need to. So actually I'm going to start off with the kimchi actually. So I have two types of kimchi here. You might be able to see, oops, side by side, you might be able to see the difference. One is a little bit lighter, one is a little bit darker. And there's different manufacturers, different recipes, and the one on the right, this lighter colored one, does tend to be, it's a little bit lighter in flavor. The one on the left being a little bit more spicy. And so if kimchi is new to you, then perhaps going for something like this one in particular. Again, this is a local company, but Flack Family Farm. This one also local, Sober Mesa. But going for one that is a little bit lighter in color, a little bit lighter in flavor. But we'll do maybe one of each because I have them out. Let's see here, I can use a fork. But so we're just going to put this right on top here. This makes for a really good appetizer as well if you have dinner guests. It's something that you can make up quite a bit in advance. If you had wanted to, you could also use the juice from the kimchi in the salad dressing. So then we'll put on a little bit of, we'll put on some beets, some shredded beets, add a little bit of sweetness. Also some like really beautiful, rich beet color. And so if anybody knows me, they know that I like to talk about nutrient balance a lot. And what that means is that when we eat, regardless of what meal it is, that we aim for a 1/4 plate protein, a 1/4 plate carbohydrate, and half the volume of the meal coming from vegetables and fruit. This meal in particular is very plant heavy. However, and so we could say, yes, we certainly have half a plate of vegetables, we're getting healthy fat. It doesn't necessarily have a source of carbohydrate, not one that provides any bulk. So if we were having this as part of a meal, we would want to think about, okay, are we going to have some rice with our meal? Are we going to have another whole grain, perhaps some barley or farro, some quinoa even? Actually, this would pair really nicely with a curry lentil quinoa burger, which is another culinary medicine cooking class that I've done. And certainly go to my table if you want to check that out. So for protein with this meal, and we'll get a little bit of carbohydrate, but mostly fat and protein with these, are toasted sesame seeds and toasted Brazil nuts. And so I toasted these in advance. I encourage you to do so the same. Doing them in advance, again, takes the stress away from the moment of actually building the salad. Toasting your nuts and seeds at home is relatively easy. I like to do it over the stovetop over medium heat, and so that allows me to stay the most present with the process. Because if anybody has done this at home, you know that nuts and seeds can go from raw, warm, to burnt really quickly if we don't keep our eye on it. So the thing for me is that when I'm toasting my seeds, I have them over medium heat, not any higher. I keep the pan moving either with my hand or with a spoon, and I smell and I look, and I'm smelling for a change in smell, a change in aroma. It does not necessarily mean that I'm looking for a particular smell, because honestly, I don't know what a toasted Brazil nut smells like, but I'm smelling for a change. And that change tells me that those carbohydrates, those fats, are starting to heat up. So I smell, I look to, I'm seeing if the colors are changing, and then I also listen. If we're hearing like crackling, things along those lines, what we can do is we can take it off the heat as soon as we see these changes, put it into a bowl. It's going to continue to toast a little bit once we put it into the bowl. So this is something we can do in advance to hopefully, make this process a little bit easier. And actually, before I finish it off with the sesame seeds and Brazil nuts, I'm going to put the salad dressing on. And so actually I'll give it a little bit more of a shake. Put that right over. And this is great. The color from the beets really bleeds out. And then finishing it on top with some toasted Brazil nuts and the toasted sesames. You can have as much as you want of these. I am certainly not going to say otherwise. So here we are. We have our kimchi avocado salad. I won't tilt it too much, but hopefully you can see it's very colorful. The juices of the dressing, and then this one with the slightly more mild kimchi. And this again can be a great appetizer, a complement to your meal, and certainly an excellent way to get naturally fermented foods and prebiotic fibers into your diet. I hope that this has been informative. I hope you give the recipe a try, and thank you very much. Be well.